Hi, everybody. I really to this. However, I'll just give you a really super quick background of, I guess what QRIDA's role in this whole scheme of thing is. So basically, when one of the disasters that Dr. Andrew was talking about earlier on, that does feel to be quite likely this year, those cyclones or floods, or the tropical low that comes through and creates a bit of havoc in our regions. Basically what happens is, industry then contacts Department of Agriculture and Fisheries and an impact survey is completed. And once that impact survey is completed and we know what, I guess the scale and the impacts of that disaster can be, DAF then take that through to the Queensland Reconstruction Authority, and those LGAs that have been disaster impacted become activated. So it just basically means that, the paperwork's done and it's, officially a disaster, I guess, and that leads to financial assistance being available. There's a couple of tiers of financial assistance that is available, and QRA actually look after, all of that, I guess the LGA stuff that happens when a disaster hits. So the roads and the bridges and the causeways and things like that. They're responsible for the funding of that to the local councils. However, when it also impacts farmland, so primary producers, as well as towns for small businesses, not-for-profit organisations, the sporting and rec teams, things like that, and the churches, all of those sorts of things, that impact then comes through and we provide assistance in that area. So when we're talking about, particularly primary producing, it's a category C program and a category B program rather. B is a loan. I remember it by saying that it needs to be paid back. Now, a loan, it's extremely low interest rate. It's concessional lending. It's for people that have, you're in a disaster, but sometimes the assistance that's available doesn't quite kick it, and there's a downturn in productivity and cash flow. So there's a boost there. The loans are a very helpful program. It provides not just money, but it also provides, a good business plan can be shown to a bank further along to say that, even in a disaster, I could pay back a loan. But then also what gets activated is that category C. And that's really about community building. It's not just about the farmers, not just about the small businesses that are impacted, but it is about community building. So that funding, it is often $25,000 from the state government. And then if the disaster is a little bit more monumental, we do go, as a state, goes to NEMA, who we just finished the little bit of a difficult technical talk there, and NEMA is responsible for funding a little bit of money as well to go in to make it a category D, which just means that it's a big disaster and there's extra money from the federal government kicked in as well. Now, often that can range, like I said, anywhere from, it could be anywhere from $5,000 right up to $75,000, depending on the severity and the impacts. But we don't know what that looks like, obviously, until it's all done and dusted. But what you can do in preparation for that for this year, I've been suggesting to people that the most important thing, when you're thinking about getting ready for this, is get photos. So it's handy to have photos pre-event. So today's the 21st of October. Have a bit of a walk around, take some photos of what things look like today. And if a disaster hits, you've really got some good comparison photos, because when you do apply for any sort of funding, impacts and proof of, I guess, evidence of that disaster and the damage is required. So those photos are really important. We actually require between 5 and 10, gives us a really good, it really does display what's happened there. Really handy nowadays that we've got, everyone sort of has a smartphone in their pocket. So all of the data that those photos provide, so the time, the date, even the location sometimes can be embedded in that photo as well. And that's really helpful, especially if there's more than one disaster. Now, I know in southern Queensland this year, there's been a couple of places, a couple of LGAs that have had you know, up to 4 disasters since November. So, you know, they've been heavily impacted, and they might be entitled to apply more than one event. So having that data on that phone is really, really important, because then it allows us to, you know, I guess, do the assessment for each individual disaster that somebody may have incurred. Apart from that, there is always, of course, the rural financial counsellors in your regions that will be able to assist to apply for any of the funding that's available. And I guess another really big hurdle that happens, and it happens everywhere and it happens with everything, is when somebody applies to QRIDA, we actually look at it a case-by-case basis. Every single person is looked at as an individual. So, you know, you may have heard, you know, down the pub or over the fence that, you know, someone didn't get the funding, or you know, someone did this and it doesn't seem like it was an eligible activity. Get it from the horse's mouth. Come to us, talk to us, and we'll talk about eligibility. We'll talk about your specific situation, and you know, point you in the right direction about making sure that your application, you know, is ready to go on what is actually required. When we're talking primary producers, eligibility, like on a sort of surface level, a rural entity that is a primary producer that derives more than 50% of their total gross income and spends more than 50% of their total labour on that farm entity. And apart from that, that's pretty basic. We do take things into account, you know, the fact that it's been a pretty difficult couple of years, and you may have had to go off farm to, you know, in the last 12 months to, you know, live day to day. We take all of that into effect, and that's absolutely something that we can discuss at the time of application. But safely taking photos is probably the biggest key thing that keep it in the back of your mind. You know, apart from being, you know, like the normal things about being storm prepared, you know, like, you know, making sure that any, you know, waterways are debris free, and that, you know, you've got, you know, you've contacted your insurance company leading up to an event to see what your coverage actually is, you know, thinking about all of those things. But, you know, accessing that impact study through the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries is really important. So then they get an idea of how big it is, activate it, and then it comes through to us. That's pretty much the whole DRFA in a nutshell. But I'm happy to take any questions whatsoever.